Welcome to the Purpose-Based Retirement with Certified Financial Planner Casey Weade. Casey is the president of Howard Bailey Financial.
Whatever risk you face during your retirement years, we've got a plan.
A published author and radio host.
It's not how much we make during the good times, it's how much we keep during those really bad times.
His advocacy for retirees and pre-retirees has made him a sought-after speaker and trusted financial leader.
And putting a real plan together.
This is the Purpose-Based Retirement.
Thank you for tuning in again. I am Lee Kelso here with Casey Weade. He's a certified financial planner and the president of Howard Bailey Financial. We're going to begin the program today taking a look at retirement income management. Some of the things that you need to think about as you plan for that 30 years of voluntary unemployment. And then a little bit later on, we'll be taking a look at the disconnect that can happen between spouses when it comes to retirement. I think that's one that might be beneficial for you to stay around for sure. Let's get to Casey now and take a look at the mindset and the shift that has to undergo as we face retirement. You know, through our lives, income's always important, but it never is it more important when you're in retirement.
Yeah, we get so caught up in our working years focusing on growth and accumulation, and that's just a factor of the world that we live in today that's so much different than the world that maybe your parents or grandparents retired in and worked in at the same time. Even 20 or 30 years ago, we had the prevalence or the widespread use of pension plans, and those things went away very quickly over the last 30 years, and we've seen this shift to more defined contribution plans instead of defined benefit plans, and now we're very used to trying to hit home runs, trying to invest in the market, trying to invest in mutual funds and getting ourselves and our savings to grow as quickly as possible till we get to retirement, while those older generations were just focused on working so that they could get that pension payment and that gold watch when they stepped into retirement. And now it's so much different that we have to focus on shifting our way of thinking. Now we've been so caught up in growth, now we have to shift that way of thinking of growth at all costs to now to preservation and income from those assets that have been saved. And sometimes that's a difficult transition to just get your mind thinking about it in a different way. It's income, it's cash flow, it's return of my money rather than return on my money. And there's specialists out there that specialize in helping people get to retirement, and it's all about mutual funds and stocks and accumulation and growth at all costs. And then there's also specialists like ourselves who focus exclusively on retirees, and you're going to see me get pumped up when we're talking about income, when we're talking about cash flow, because that's what adds value to a retiree's life. When you have a solid income plan in retirement, that gives you a solid foundation to have the confidence to spend and enjoy your retirement.
So step one in that is we have to figure out how long do we think we're going to be needing that cash coming through the door, right?
Right, that's the first part. We say, well, what's the duration? How long do we need those funds to last? And that's a very difficult question to answer, but many people underestimate how long they need those assets to last. And many times we just pick our life expectancy. We'll say, well, we'll use 20 years, or maybe your financial advisor used 25 years or 30 years. But with the medical advancements that we've seen in technology and healthcare, people are living longer and longer lives. So that 25-year retirement, if you plan on 25 and it goes an extra 5 years, do you have a strategy for that? Or is that going to be disastrous to the overall scenario? In many cases, even just minor increases in that duration that that portfolio needs to last can have a dramatic impact on the success of a retirement. This is why it's so important to start focusing on things that can give you an income. If you don't have a pension, give you your very own pension so that you can turn that 401k into income for the rest of your life, regardless of how long you live.
So that means we have to really take a good close look at and identify the risks that we're going to face in retirement.
Sure. I mean, that first part's longevity, right? That is a risk. How long are we going to live, and how long are we going to need this income? What's the duration that they need to last? And then we focus on, well, what are the risks to that income strategy? The biggest one's probably going to be market risk. What if we have a major market downturn on the first 5 or 10 years of retirement? Whenever that market downturn occurs, are we going to be able to still continue with that income that we planned on drawing without running out of money? What about inflation? What about major healthcare issues in the future, emergencies? We have to plan for all these different contingencies and make sure we're filling in some of these gaps, which are the bigger gaps, before we get into some of the smaller gaps, which are still important. It's just we're looking at this one piece at a time. Do we have our income set up? Because if we don't have income, we don't have retirement. And then we play a little defense here against some of those things that we can't really control, like inflation, like healthcare emergencies. Now we're getting on to number 3, right?
Which is taxes and your state.
Right, so whatever's left over, really. Right. And so we have our first piece, which is our emergency fund, our income strategy, filling in the risks to the income strategy, that growth strategy for inflation. Once we've satisfied a lot of those overarching risks, now we're taking care of some of what's left. What's left over to fill in the cracks, and what are some of those cracks? Is it estate planning? Do we have our basic estate plan in place so that whatever we have when we do pass away is going to pass on to our heirs in the most efficient way possible? And many times I find that people don't even have beneficiaries established on their retirement accounts. I've seen beneficiaries of a divorced individual before who still had the ex-spouse named as the beneficiary, changed the will, didn't change the beneficiaries, and that could lead to disastrous consequences upon death because those beneficiary designations override whatever it says in the will. And then do some of your tax planning, figure out how to fill in some of those taxes, some of those gaps, some of those things that are important. But we first satisfy the income, then we satisfy the major risks and the smaller risks, and then we're getting into some of these cracks that we're trying to fill.
So what are some of those gaps? You've mentioned gaps a couple of times. I assume healthcare is one of those?
Right. Healthcare is going to be one of those things. What if we have a major crisis where we have skilled nursing care costs that are $10,000 a month or $7,000 a month? How are you going to pay for those things? Is your retirement plan considering all those potential risks, or have you just been focusing on income and growth? I just want to make 6% a year and I hope that I don't have any bad years in there. Have you planned for all these things? Major market downturns, inflation, major healthcare issues, taxes, maybe rising in the future, planning for each one of these things one at a time. And once we've done that, now we can just manage the plan. We implement the plan, and then we manage and update the plan on a regular basis, because you're going to go through different stages. We can sit here and we can lay out a plan for the next 30 years, but things are going to change over the next 20 years or the next 30 years. As you go through these different years in retirement, different products are going to change, interest rates are going to change, markets are going to change, and we have to be prepared and be flexible enough to change when those things occur. But if we don't have a written plan, if we don't have a plan when we start retirement, how do we ever expect to get to where we actually want to be at the end of retirement?
And I think the first step for enacting that plan, and at least figuring out where you start with that plan, is something I want to offer you today, and that is the chance to be one of the next 10 people who call right now. It's a complimentary review of your financial and retirement plan. It's an opportunity to get a real education about your money, about your resources, about your future, so you can make the best decisions possible. So for the next 10 callers, Casey and the team will make time on the calendar, meet with you, and give you your very own purpose-based retirement. When we come back, Marshall Johnson joins us, and we'll be talking about the couple's disconnect around retirement. You stay with us.
Hi, I'm Casey Weade, a certified financial planner practitioner and the president of Howard Bailey Financial. Do you feel that your financial professional should put your interests above all else? Well, I do, but Wall Street doesn't. While lobbyists seek to delay a universal fiduciary duty on all retirement accounts across the financial services industry, you can begin working with an advisory team that's ahead of the curve. Don't you want to work with someone who puts your interests ahead of their own? If you said yes, then give us a call today.
You need a plan for retirement to create the lifestyle you've always dreamed of. The first step is to tune into the Purpose-Based Retirement Radio Hour with your hosts, Casey Weade and Marshall Johnson, every Saturday morning at 11 and Sunday afternoon at 1 on 1190 WOWO and 107.5 FM.
Marshall's back with us now. Marshall Johnson is a certified financial planner as well. He's the vice president at Howard Bailey Financial. We're here today talking about a study about couples. I guess the word to use is disconnect and how they think and plan about retirement.
You know, I like to bring up studies that kind of illustrate things that we see in the office each and every week, Lee. And one thing that we see a lot of families struggle with is that communication around finance. Now, Fidelity just recently published a study about couples as related to finance, And what they found was many couples feel that, hey, we do communicate very well. Over 70% said we communicate very well. Over 90% said they communicate effectively. But when pressed for the numbers, Lee, what they found out was couples really struggled, 4 in 10 struggled to name their spouse's income, even close to what it is. Many, over 10% were off by more than $25,000. So the problem here is we're creating not just a problem pre-retirement, but a problem into retirement, because Casey, as we know, it's very important to know what we're spending today, because that's going to help us plan for retirement. If we don't know our numbers today, if we don't know what our spending is today, how can we help plan for tomorrow? One of the other numbers was over 60% didn't know their Social Security numbers. In Lee, of that, what's really scary is 50% of those are baby boomers. They're nearing retirement. So if we don't understand what help Social Security is going to play, if we don't understand what our income is, that makes it very challenging to create a retirement plan.
Yeah. So I think a lot of what we're saying here is when it comes to communication, these two spouses, one may know what the Social Security benefit is, the other one doesn't know. One knows the income, the other one doesn't know. And I see, for me, a lot of the folks that I'm sitting down with, a disconnect between their goals for retirement, just these overarching big topic goals that they've never had this conversation around before. And we have to start having this conversation before we actually sit down with a financial advisor, or trust me, that creates a very awkward situation. I would rather not be working in a marriage counselor capacity, more of a financial planning capacity, but that ends up happening sometimes because we start having these conversations about things we didn't ask ourselves before or didn't talk about as couples. And the one that I see more often than anything else is probably this gap between what we are concerned about what we leave behind to the kids, or we want to spend it all. You know, quite often there's one spouse that says, no, I would really like to spend as much, this is our savings, we want to spend as much as we possibly can. Hopefully we can spend our last dollar and write a bad check right before they put a nail in the coffin. And the other spouse says, well, I really want to maximize what I'm leaving behind for the next generation. And our job is to sit there and say, how do we compromise and accomplish all these goals? Because typically we can. You know, there's typically some trade-offs, but we can find a middle ground. And that might mean if we retire with $1 million, we don't leave behind $3 million, but let's see how we can preserve the principal for the next generation and maybe even do it on a guaranteed basis. So just finding that middle ground and starting that communication process, hopefully before you step into that advisor's office rather than when you're there.
The study found that one of the things that seems to be universal is if you plan more, you worry less.
Yeah, most of those worries, and you touched on a few of those in the opening segment, it's about healthcare, unexpected healthcare costs. That was the number one worry for retirees and pre-retirees. 72% of those responded. But over 40% were really concerned about running out of money, Lee. And those numbers are starting to change a little bit. The healthcare worries are going up. Running out of money is going down. But the key there is to plan ahead and to get a comprehensive plan. Less than 2 in 10 of those that responded to the survey actually have a plan in place, Casey. And that is part of the concern, because those that have a plan in place were more likely to respond that they were going to be very comfortable in retirement or less likely to run out of money because they had that certainty. They knew that they had a plan in place to deal with rising health care, to deal with inflation, to deal with adding in some longevity insurance and making sure that they're not going to run out of money.
You know, and I think we often don't think about these things, and even maybe they aren't concerns until we start naming the actual risks that you're going to face as you step into retirement. And that happens all of a sudden. It sometimes hits us all at once. We've never thought about retirement, and now all of these things come to a head. Now it's health care, now it's taxes, now it's income. They say, well, this has to last the rest of my life. Now I'm unemployed. I can't work that overtime that I used to. And maybe you're planning on working part-time, but maybe we can't get a part-time job for any number of reasons. So we have to start filling in all these different gaps once we get to that point so that we really know these are our risks. We've defined the risks, and now we're confronting each one at a time. When you have that comprehensive plan, that written plan that you've stated there, now we can say, well, what if we have inflation? Well, the people I work with just grab this little box we give them, they pop it open, they pull out this sheet, and they go, okay, there's our inflation strategy. Okay, there's our market's down, there's our market strategy. We've got a plan for everything.
Well, there's another P word besides planning that comes into all of this, and it's one that I'm sure Oh, I'm sure you're never guilty of at home, are you? And that is procrastination.
Yeah, procrastination is the number one challenge, cited as the number one challenge for couples really getting a handle on all this. And I see it day in and day out. We sit down with a lot of families, and I get it. You know, talking about finance, planning retirement is not a whole lot of fun for some people, and for some spouses, they absolutely hate the idea of sitting down and digging into this. But I can tell you, it creates so much more trust in each other. It empowers people to take action. So do this together, make it fun. You don't have to, it's not like going to the dentist. It can be an enjoyable event, but plan it out and make sure you do it together, because Casey, you talked about one spouse having the planning side, and we see that from time to time where one is the CFO, as if you will, and the other does other things. But try and do that together, because as we see time and time again, eventually that one spouse may be gone and now it's all on the plate of the other. So do these things together, because it's going to empower you and make you just that much more comfortable in the plan.
You know, and what I find with a lot of these anxieties that we might have, you know, you currently maybe you find yourself that you have anxiety about having enough saved for retirement. Do I have enough? And you just keep trying to strive to save more and maybe take on more risk. And once you actually spend the time to sit down and get that plan, get the analysis in place, what we so often find is that you've got enough saved for retirement. Now we just need to protect it and put together a plan for the rest of your life. So I know maybe you've been procrastinating for the last 5 years, but I can promise you, by getting this out of the way, you can get rid of a lot of the anxiety that you have, and the reason you've been procrastinating will quickly wash itself away.
How about that? Working with a financial planner is the equivalent of financial Xanax. Who would have guessed? Well, we have the opportunity for you to get involved. We hope you're one of the next 10 people to pick up the phone and call right now. And you have a chance for a complimentary financial review of your entire financial and retirement plan. It's that opportunity we talk about to get an education so that you are making the best decisions you can going forward. So for the next 10 callers, Casey and the Howard Bailey team will make time on the calendar, visit with you, and give you your very own purpose-based retirement. Here's our question of the day. What is the most common planning step retirees take prior to retirement? Have they consulted with a financial professional? Have they planned for medical expenses? Maybe that's long-term care expenses they're planning for, or they've estimated their retirement expenses. We'll have the answer when we come back.
You don't walk into a doctor's office for some blanket prescription for whatever ails you. You expect individualized attention, a doctor who listens, and a treatment prescribed to meet your specific need. When it comes to your financial future, why expect anything less? If you would like an independent checkup from an independent advisor with access to hundreds of possible solutions to help you meet your goals, contact us today.
You need a plan for retirement to create the lifestyle you've always dreamed of. The first step is to tune into the Purpose-Based Retirement Radio Hour with your hosts, Casey Weade and Marshall Johnson, every Saturday morning at 11 and Sunday afternoon at 1 on 1190 WOWO and 107.5 FM.
So heading into the break, we asked you our question of the day, and here it is again. It is, what is the most common planning step retirees likely take prior to retirement? You can read the answers on your screen, but which one is correct, Casey?
Well, Lee, the answer is D, estimating retirement expenses. So luckily, we're finding people that are focusing on the most important part of the equation, which is how much you actually spending. And this is something that hopefully you've got a good handle on before you consult with a financial professional, so they're not telling you how much income you need. You've actually done the math, and so you can step in with confidence knowing that they're creating enough income that's going to satisfy all those expenses that you might have throughout your retirement years. So start creating a budget now, start doing your tracking now, maybe even use the envelope system, whatever it takes for you to get a good handle on your budget and how much you're spending month to month. That number, that answer to that question came from a study that was done by the Insured Retirement Institute titled, "It's All About Income." The Insured Retirement Institute is a non-for-profit organization, a coalition of over 40 different organizations across the United States to provide independent advice for retirees about retirement income. They surveyed over 800 different retirees that have been in retirement from anywhere from 5 to 15 years, and they finalized a study this year. We're going to take a look at some of these findings. I picked a handful of these things out to hopefully get the engine started and get you thinking about where you might want to be and some of the things that you might need to start working on today. That first one is, what have those planning steps been for retirees? So what are some of the things that you should be doing to get yourself prepared? We've got a list of those things here, and that first one that people do more than anything else, 53% of those retirees first started with an estimate of their retirement expenses, nothing more important. Number two, they consulted with a financial professional about retirement. Number three, they planned for medical expenses. So income, expenses, those are the things we're focusing on first. Consulting with a professional so that you have that peace of mind that you've implemented a good, sound financial plan. What I found startling, which was only 18% of individuals actually created a written plan as one of those planning steps for retirement. And that really concerns me, because if you don't have a written plan, just like we said in the last segment, how are you confident that you're going to get to where you want to be? Next up is retirement timing. So when did retirees retire? Well, about 50% of those that were retired as planned on their planned retirement date. About 32% retired earlier than planned, 10% retired later than planned, and the other 8% had no plan whatsoever. I think what we can point out from this is that even though you may be planning on a set retirement date of 2 years from now or 5 years from now, any number of reasons can knock that plan out of place. So have a plan, if you're that close to retirement, that you can step into retirement tomorrow if you need to, and make sure that your plan is going to satisfy the retirement income, whether you retire today or 5, 10 years from now, whenever that date might be. We need some flexibility in there. That's going to give you the confidence to walk into work knowing that if you want to retire tomorrow, you have the ability to do so. Let's take a look at where that retirement income is coming from. And I want to focus on the Social Security part of this. What I think we find quite startling is about 50% of those Social Security beneficiaries, of people receiving Social Security, for about 50% of those individuals, it makes up 75% or more of their retirement income. That's a huge percentage. Over 50% of Americans receiving Social Security, 75% or more of their retirement income is made up by that Social Security benefit. Then we have 40% of those individuals are counting on Social Security to make up somewhere between 25 and 50% of their retirement income. That's such a huge decision that we need to make sure we're making the best decision for ourselves when we make it. Now, when we look at when people begin to take those Social Security benefits, we find that 61% of those took that Social Security benefit prior to age 65. So they filed for Social Security early. Why did they do that if every major outlet, every major periodical and retirement analyzer that's out there today is going to tell us that we should be delaying those benefits so that we get more and more income and about an 8% increase every year and get those benefits closer to 70 or 66 or 67? Why are we taking it early? And that's one of the startling things that we find. More importantly, make sure you have an analysis and know why you're taking it when you take it. Maybe the best thing is that you take it at 62. Maybe the best thing is that you take it at 70, but it depends on your individual situation. Now, why are people making withdrawals from the retirement accounts? So, of these over 800 retirees, they found that the number one reason that these retirees were making withdrawals from their IRAs that were once maybe 401ks was to satisfy the required minimum distributions. So 54% of individuals said the reason they're taking money out of their accounts is to satisfy RMDs, not to take care of their regular expenses or big ticket items, any unexpected expenses, medical expenses. The number one reason was to satisfy the required minimum distribution, meaning that they probably didn't want to take that income in the first place, but they're being forced to take it. So get a plan in place before you get to age 70, where you have to begin starting to take distributions after the age of 70 and a half. Make sure you have a plan before you get there for how you're going to take those distributions, and maybe you can reduce those distributions by doing some planning today for by the time you get there. And when you get them, let's make sure we're not going to continue to pay taxes on our gains when we reinvest them. What about retirees that are receiving annuity payments? About 30% of retirees are receiving an annuity payment in some way, shape, or form, be it a pension or some type of private pension plan like they might buy through a private insurer. And they found that over 70% of retirees that are receiving annuity payments are very satisfied or somewhat satisfied. So do you have guaranteed income during retirement? Because we want you to be part of that 70 or 80% group that's very satisfied because they know they're never going to run out of income during retirement. What about those that are very or somewhat satisfied with their investments? Of those that are very or somewhat satisfied with their investments, those that had IRAs, about 67% were very satisfied. Those that had the traditional investments of stocks, bonds, and mutual funds, about 63% of those were satisfied. Those that were receiving income from annuities, were 72% of those individuals were very somewhat satisfied. So those that are receiving guaranteed income, that's obvious why they're so satisfied, right? They know they've got a paycheck coming in every single month for the rest of their lives, regardless of what happens in the market. What about contingency planning? So have we planned for potential contingencies such as cognitive impairment? If we have a major illness where we can't perform 2 out of 6 activities of daily living, how's that going to leave us? What about funeral and final expense planning? Have we planned for those things? What if we pass away? Is our spouse going to be okay with the continuation of their income? For instance, if you have Social Security benefits that total $3,000 a month, if one of the spouses passes away, you're going to lose a smaller of those 2 benefits. What if the benefits are close to the same? That could mean a reduction of about 50% in your retirement income at the death of the first spouse. But I think what's pretty neat is we found that 89% of retirees planned for continuation of spousal income. They planned for funeral expenses and final expenses. They planned for potential cognitive impairment at 73% of those individuals. So doing a fantastic job of doing real planning here. Make sure you're part of that 70 to 80% group as well. Retirees estimating the probability that they would need long-term care. Also a startling figure, finding that less than 10% believe that 35% would be their odds. So we found, more startling than anything else, that the majority of people think there's a less than 10% chance that they're going to have the probability to need some form of long-term care benefits. And in reality, it's about 70% of retirees, a 65-year-old going through their retirement years, will need some form of long-term care, home health care, assisted living, and nursing home care. When they found and asked those individuals, well, how are you going to pay for your long-term care benefits? The number one way they said they would pay was through Medicare. Well, the fact is that Medicare is not going to take care of 2 out of 6 activities of daily living. They're not going to pay for skilled nursing care beyond 20 days or home health care, assisted living. So make sure you have a plan, because Medicare is not going to cover you when those risks begin to occur.
Yeah, and color me as a skeptic, but putting that much faith and trust in Washington to help me get through retirement makes me a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's up to you. As we said, it's your responsibility to implement your plan. It's your responsibility to get control of your financial life and make sure it's on the right path so you have the confidence you deserve.
And one of the first steps is right in front of you right now. We hope you'll be one of the next 10 people who pick up the phone and call 482-9559 and get in line for a complimentary financial review of your entire financial and retirement plan, and opportunity to learn more about your money so you can make really good decisions moving forward for you and your family. So for the next 10 callers, Casey and the team will make time on the calendar to visit with you and give you your very own purpose-based retirement. Of course, you're always welcome to learn more about Casey's thoughts and feelings and more about the company at howardbailey.com. You can email Casey at info@howardbailey.com. And who knows, we might invite you to join us in a phone call on a future broadcast. And you can always get a copy of Casey's book online as well. And we will see you next week.